people can catch up with the important stuff. Not that introducing isn't important, but welcome and thank you for joining us this morning. The webinar this morning, as you can see, is about CRISA 2, and the reason we wanted to highlight this topic in particular is that information and contextualizing that information is often difficult for us in our day-to-day lives if it's not something we do every day. Today, we're lucky to have two people who work with investments, one person who's focused on ESG and another person who incorporates that into their daily practice. And we will take you through that. So let me quickly introduce you to everyone. I don't know if you want to raise your hand or something. We just so that people know, but I'm sure they'll pick it up as we go through. So we have Belena Negash from ESG Manager at the Government Employees Pension Fund. Welcome, Belena. Thank you for joining. And we also have Grace Chahuke, who's the Investment Officer at the Transport Sector Retirement Fund. Grace is also a member of the IRFA Investment Practices Committee. Thank you, Grace, for joining us. And we also have my fellow facilitator and IRFA Vice President, Amanda Koza, with us this morning. Thank you, Amanda, for joining us. And we'll kick off from there. So the session is going to be in two parts, basically. The first part is what is CRISA, or what is CRISA 2, for those who aren't familiar with what CRISA is in the first place. We're assuming we're walking into this presentation with very little, no knowledge. And for those of us who have more knowledge on CRISA, please support us by asking questions and guiding us. For those who are new to this, please ask questions, and your questions will also guide us with the conversation. So first part is about contextualizing what CRISA is and how you incorporate it into your practice. So Belena will do the first introduction, and then Grace will tell us more about what she does in her daily practice as well. And then we'll have a bit of a discussion based on questions that have been generated, or some of the questions we will ask from between the panelists and the facilitator as well. Enough from me. Thank you again for joining. Thank you everyone for being part of this. And I'm going to hand over to Belena. I will stop sharing, and you can, if you need help with the slides, just let me know. Otherwise, over to you. Thank you, Belena.
Thank you so much, Wayne, and thank you for also having this webinar. I think that for most of us who are in this field, you know, we do experience quite a plethora of, you know, codes and good governance, etc., and it can get quite hairy and quite confusing. So I thought to, you know, try and have a more of a discussion around, you know, what is CRISA, you know, why does it exist, and what does it mean for us, and you know, just kind of try and make it as easy and understandable for all of us. Once again, thank you everyone, and my name is Belena Negash. I'm the ESG manager at the GEPF, and I have been in this space since 2012. So I would certainly say that my ESG knowledge has potentially grown as much as, you know, kind of grown with the industry's body of knowledge. So I will get started. So, you know, I thought I would start with what were the early drivers of ESG in South Africa. And some of you might remember that long ago, there was the JSE SRI index that started back in 2004. And that was quite a phenomenal thing, especially given the fact that we are an emerging market economy. You know, the JSE was quite a pioneer in starting that. And then also there was the King Committee on Corporate Governance that started back in 1994. I think I was like 7 years old, so I certainly wouldn't have known much about that. But
Belena, sorry to interrupt. Can you maybe change your setting? We're seeing it on a display. Otherwise, I'm happy to share, and then you can just tell me to move on for you. Sorry to interrupt you there.
That's fine. That's strange. Let me try again. If this does this work? No.
No, I think maybe if you can go back,
Okay.
that little thing on the side there, that at the bottom there, that there next to the sizing at the that one. Let's just see. No, it's doing the same thing. Do you mind? I'll
sure, go for it.
Let me share for us. Oh, thanks, man. Sorry to interrupt you, and you were doing such a good job there. Apologies.
Oh, what about if now? No. Okay, so let me stop sharing then. Sorry about
that. No problem. Sorry, man. It's just you've done all this good work. We want to make sure that it's shared.
All right. Well, I think in the interest of time, I'll just carry on.
Carry on. Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah.
And yeah, so the King Committee on Corporate Governance started in 1994, and now we're on the 4th iteration of that. Which kind of really tells us how ahead South Africa has been in terms of thinking about governance, kind of thinking about where should we, where can we get it right? And then, of course, we had the launch of UNPRI in 2005, and then the revision of Regulation 28 in March 2012, and then of course the launch of CRISA 1 in 2012 as well. And then following that came the guide for responsible investing for pension funds in 2013. I'm very lucky and privileged to work for the GEPF that has been part of the early days of the SRI index, and also the launch of CRISA 1, and also the guide for responsible investing for pension funds back in 2013. Wayne, sorry, if you could just go one slide back. Yes, I managed to find a photo or of the forward of the King Code for corporate governance from 1994. So that was quite an interesting thing to see, quite an old document that was really, instrumental post-apartheid South Africa. So that just really shows how ahead of the game we are in South Africa. And then going on to the next slide, we've got a drunk Bear Stearns there. That following the financial crisis in 2008, I remember I was an intern at that time, and I was really concerned about how am I going to find work? What is the point of even graduating in an economy that just doesn't seem to have any room for somebody like me? So it's kind of shows that we were living in a world where it was all about short-termism. The thinking around, it's all about today, we don't care what happens, profit, and then of course, on the next slide, we've got the Lehman Brothers story once again, really symbolizing that perhaps we should be thinking of a different way of doing things. Next slide, Wayne, thank you. And then, of course, we see that over here we've got the preamble to Regulation 28. We've got the pension fund amendment to that, and starting to really bring in the idea of taking or ensuring that corporate governance issues should be taken into account, including, but now it's not just about governance, but it's also about the social and the environmental aspect. Of course, at this point in time, there was no actual discussion of what exactly ESG aspects trustees or investors should be looking at, but really just around, kind of throwing out the idea of, we should actually start looking at long-term impact and the sustainability of our investments. And if we go on to the next slide, now we've got the idea of what is CRISA. So CRISA came about, as I mentioned earlier, in 2011, and this of course came on the back of the King report, which was submitted by the South African PRI network, which called for the guidance to an investor community to be included into the report. And then the King committee recommended that a separate code should be drafted to specifically set out the expectations from institutional investors. And that is how the CRISA, the first CRISA code came about. And it came on the back of the 2008 financial crisis. And of course, it was a culmination of, we need to start evolving, and we need to have that paradigm shift of redefining what value is. And it's not just about looking at things like capital asset pricing model, but it's about redefining the way that we do things. And also because simply of the fact that as investors, especially as trustees, we're looking at long-term sustainable risk-adjusted returns. So if we go on to the next slide, some of you may recall the first code that the first CRISA iteration that came out. Once again, the GPF was also instrumental in launching that code. And of course, we had the FSB at the time, a CRISA, PRA at the time, all coming through and endorsing this code. Next slide, please. And then, of course, some of you may recall in 2013, we had the IFC and the PRA coming together, releasing the Guide to Responsible Investing for Pension Funds. So yeah, that's just a little bit of history for some of you who may be new in the CRISA idea. And also, this is when I actually started getting involved with responsible investing. I recall attending one of the PRA events back in 2012, I think it was, and it was very confusing, to say the least. I recall at the time Googling what is ESG, and there was nothing on Google. So, it just shows how much this idea has become, has grown so much. So fast forward to 2022, there was a general sense that from the investment community that, perhaps we're lagging a little bit in both urgency and scope. And so the CRISA committee came together to launch the CRISA 2 code. And this was launched last year at the GPF annual Thought Leadership Conference. And it was really just about sharpening that recognition of how investments, arrangements, and activities intersect with the environment and society. It's kind of to reaffirm the framework of the principles for stewardship, and of course, trying to once again cement the South African governance framework. And this time, the code can be applied by asset owners, asset managers, service providers, and anyone who really wants to voluntarily align themselves with the principles. And for the first time, we're also calling for any investor that wants to invest in South Africa to also sign up to these principles. So as South Africans, we can really be proud of ourselves of how far we have come. Next slide, please. So this is how the handbook looks like. And it's really to just, trying to move towards achieving positive outcomes. So the CRISA 2 code is whilst the principles still remain the same from CRISA 1, it's more outcomes based, it's more intentional. And of course, this is simply because we have been doing this now, we're fast forwarding 10, 11 years. So, we understand the landscape of South Africa. We understand, what investors want. And so if we can move to the next slide. You'll see that from the handbook, we can see really it's become more punchy, it's become more succinct, and really the principles, although still remain there, it's become more intentional. And that is one of the personal things that I like about the CRISA 2 code. If you move onto the next slide, we see that in terms of implementing these principles, there's kind of like a systematic iterative process of 5 areas, and that is integrating the material ESG factors, demonstrating how we intend on accepting this and enabling effective stewardship, contributing to capacity building in an accountable manner, and promoting the transparency of disclosures. So I think for me, I see a clear alignment still with PRI. I still see the same principles also in the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is one thing that another thing that I also appreciate about CRISA 2 is that there's that clear principle base of bringing out outcomes and bringing out impact. If we go into the next slide, we see how we get to position ourselves. The stewardship and responsible investing principles are coming through, and it's not just, once again, about just governance, but it's about the broader context. It's about looking across your investment value chain, across all asset classes, all investment styles, and it doesn't matter the size of your organization or your fund, but it's about evolving your organization towards the positive outcomes to address specifically the unique situation that as South Africans we experience, and that is the social challenges including poverty, inequality, unemployment, transformation, and you can see that clear thread coming through. So once again, South Africa is ahead of the game. I do believe we are seeing that integration of governance principles, social, environmental aspects being knit into, this voluntary code, and once again being linked to a broader principle such as the Sustainable Development Goals. But if we look at this thing and we say, but why should we actually care? Is this really something that we should look at? Should we be taking it seriously? But when we start looking at the facts, that like as pension funds, we have the fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interests of our beneficiaries. However, we are at a critical inflection point. We've got systemic risks that is something that we cannot diversify away from. And as South Africans, we are especially at risk because of our vulnerabilities. We've got food insecurity issues, we've got water insecurity issues, we've got high levels of inequality, social inequality, and we've also got poor infrastructure. And all of these things link to how vulnerable we are as South Africans. Wayne, please move on to the next slide. Thank you. If you look at this lovely map, you can see that Africa, especially Africa, we've got very high levels of vulnerability. And so it is clear that we need to adopt a multidimensional approach, which gets to harmonize social and economic dimensions in order to ensure that we have a positive outcome for an inclusive society, with, of course, the eradication of poverty, resource inefficiencies, and the greening of our economies. One thing that I certainly like to look at is the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report. And on the next slide, we can see that for the past 10 years, every single risk out there is related to climate risk. It's related to social risks. So it is evident that it's not something that we can really just, we actually can't afford not to care about this. If we look at the next slide, I also personally I certainly do like to see what academics out there are saying. And there's a plethora of evidence of academic research telling us that we cannot get away with not caring. And so at the GPF, we like to look at the nexus point between what our beneficiaries need, what the economy needs, and what the GPF needs to keep itself sustainable. And as the largest investor in South Africa, we keep looking at what do we believe in. Sorry, Wayne, please, next slide. Thank you. And we do believe that we've got the dual goal of investing for financial returns, positive social, economic, and environmental returns, and we certainly will not compromise on financial returns. And so when you're looking at the evidence, it all suggests that we have to do things the right way. We have to take into account ESG aspects. And so at the GPF, we consider our responsible investment policy to be underpinned against all our investment philosophies. Sorry, Wayne, the next slide, please. So one thing we certainly do not compromise on is the environment, social aspect, governance issues. And so from the beginning, from left to right, you can see that at the beginning, it's always about investment screening using ESG factors as part of our DDs. We consistently evaluate our ESG risks. We monitor the ESG activities of companies. We measure how these companies perform over time, including, of course, their ESG performance. And we also like to engage. And at the end, we like to report to all our stakeholders. And in the end, it's about doing the right thing, not just for the GPF, but of course also for broader society. And that is why we take and we believe and endorse in CRISA too. Thank you. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, Belena. Thank you very much. Before we ask Grace to tell us her thoughts, are there any other questions? There's one question which we can maybe delay for later. I see there's one hand that has been raised. I will give Anne an opportunity to raise a question. And please just unmute and you can ask your question. Thank you.
So, Belena, thanks for the presentation. I have a fundamental problem with CRISA 2, and it's certainly not without tremendous effort on parts of all the people that were putting together CRISA 2. But it's really a kind of a recognition that comes out after CRISA 2 is actually sort of nailed down, and it comes out from the PRI themselves. And what happens is that they step back and they realize, if our intention is to actually change society, change outcomes, in other words, outcomes focused, which is what CRISA keeps talking about, that they want it to be outcomes focused, then we can't just achieve that through ESG integration, that it's a far more complex challenge. And so what UNPRI came out with is that they said, it's actually a 3-step transition for the whole industry, that it goes from ESG integration to what they call IFC, which is a terrible term, but it really means, how do you structure your portfolio for sustainability? And I noticed in some of your reporting, you talk about looking at how ESG changes over time. And so that's very, very important. But the third thing, which is really what I think trustees care most about when they think about, issues like climate change, is the third element that UNPRI talks about, which is called ultimate IFC, another terrible term, which basically is about how do you actually change the system to get the outcome you need. In other words, how do you actually use your portfolio to create climate change? And as you know, at the GEPF, you can't really do that very effectively through listed assets. You have to, you have to do it through a whole combination of strategies, or if you do it through listed assets, you might be able to do it through engagement. So there's a whole complex array of things that don't actually get mentioned in CRISA, and don't actually help the trustees understand that this is quite a complex process to actually translate intention, incorporating ESG factors, into impact, which is how do you actually create changes in society. So that's my big bugbear. And I think you're on this committee, the CRISA committee, and if you are, please just update it, because I think trustees need to know what is it that they're doing that's really going to make a change, and what is it that they're doing that doesn't do anything, like people who don't want to invest in mining shares. Just abstaining from investing in anything that causes harm doesn't change anything. Little issues like that. So I'd love to hear your take on where you think the CRISA committee is going. I know this is a living document, it's going to be evolving. And I think that's the next level of evolution that we have to get trustees to get their minds around.
Thank you for your question. And so I personally do not serve on the CRISA committee, but the GPF is as part of it. I certainly would have to respectfully disagree. I do think that CRISA 2 has evolved significantly. I still do believe that that trustees do, I think, understand some of how ESG can be integrated into portfolios, and I certainly don't think it's a simple answer to to kind of not take into account the nuances that are specific to South Africa. I do think that CRISA 2 is more outcomes based. I do believe that that golden thread of trying to measure impact, and I have to say that impact is different for everyone. I do not believe that impact has to be specific or kind of homogeneous to every fund. And I do think that trustees are starting to pick that up, and yeah, so I respectfully disagree.
Conversation.
I think what I was referring to is whether or not CRISA actually gives guidance, which it doesn't. It doesn't sort of say, how do you get from point A? It says you need to have an outcomes-based focus. It does say that, but it doesn't give you any guidance as to how the hell you get there. And I think it's, I mean, what I just listened to an entire workshop that we were involved in on systems based change in investing. And in the US, they haven't even remotely begun to figure out how the hell to do it, because you have to change everything. You have to change your benchmarks. You have to change the way you monitor this stuff, the reporting. You have to change your risk models. We have a whole bunch of stuff that we haven't gotten to yet in South Africa, and they're only just getting to it, say, in Europe right now. They're only just developing these things. So we've got a long way to go. And I think it's important to get the kind of clarity that UNPRI tried to get in their document into the CRISA document, so that people understand that just by integrating ESG into your decision-making, that addresses risk, and shareholder engagement might change some shareholders about the outcomes, but it doesn't translate. So a trustee could be put hand on heart and say, we've actually managed to change the world on behalf of you, the members.
This is a very big conversation, and there's many things to say. And I mean, I think what this discussion highlights is the complexity of being able to measure and reach that outcome. But I do think that, and then Belena will jump in, yeah, please, that starting the conversation and creating awareness at least creates that mind space for people to then be able to develop the capacity to ask the more complex questions, which I think you raising, or practices that you're raising. And
right, I just don't want trustees to think just by following CRISA you've solved your problem.
No, I think the message is that this is one tool, hopefully, that expands your understanding, and you build from there. And I mean, this is definitely a conversation to take forward and look at how we can develop tools, and we'll definitely be there to work with you. Belena, I don't know if there's anything else. Grace, Amanda, if you want to add on for now.
Yeah, I think it is important that we do understand how this practically applies. It's good and well to have a beautiful looking brochure that tells you this is good for institutional investors, but the practicalities around it need to be expanded on further. And I think we will have an opportunity as we ask the questions as to what is CRISA 2.0 101 actually mean from a trustee's perspective, so that people walk away with something that they can take and implement or consider for further discussion in their funds. So I think perhaps let's give Grace an opportunity to give her presentation, and then let's explore this discussion around the practicalities of it later on in the Q&A.
Thank you, Amanda. So Grace, I think that means you're up here to share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. My approach is going to be, how we have our thinking as the TSRF in terms of CRISA 2. And I'm not going to go into the background because my learned colleague Belena has already covered that. However, I'm going to cover how TSRF aligns to CRISA and the CRISA 2 principles to be adopted by the fund, the current implementation practices and reporting elements. This is what we're currently doing. It's something that is evolving. It's something that, we can have a further enhancement, and just some closing comments on what we're going to do going forward. So as a background, we believe that the TSRF has always been aligned its objective to the CRISA principles. We believe in impact investing. We believe that the fund, through its impactful investment and socially inclusive, environmentally friendly initiatives, we create jobs, and we ease poverty by incorporating ESG into our investments. As well, we also we have a couple of stakeholders that we engage with. Those are our members, our trustees, our service providers, and we believe into making a meaningful change into the investment that we do. So some of the projects that are championed by the fund is the housing fund, the truck stops, manufacturing. We are involved in agriculture, the retail space, and we also do a township economy. In terms of the housing fund, it is a mixed house, sorry, it is a mixed use affordable development in the township. So what we do there, we are involved in the project that we're involved in. It is involved the mixed house, as in RDP houses, bonded houses, community shopping malls, hospitals, and schools. So in terms of ESG, we believe that staying in good quality houses, it adds value, and there's improved quality of life and availability of water and sanitation. This is one of the projects that we are very excited about, and to see it evolving throughout there since we have started it. It is called the Sahula Housing Fund. It's one of the project that we are quite happy as the fund to be championing. We also believe in transparency, in the openness, and involving the community that we work with across all value chains. When we create employment in that, we contract with the local service providers in terms of building those houses. We have gone and we've seen it's good quality houses. So we do believe in a meaningful change in the communities that we invest in. The other one is the truck stop. The truck stop fund, the fund had aligned, has seen that its members needed to be as most of the members are truck drivers, they needed to be taken care of, and they invested in a truck stop fund. It's in Harrismith, and what the truck stop fund does is that it provides members with the truck drivers with a resting place. They got good quality hygiene. They can shower there. There's a clinic where they can go and do some checkups, and also in terms of medication, they can get some medications there. And it is one of the projects that we are quite happy about, and we are building it into expanding to other provinces. Currently, it's in Harrismith, the Harrismith Truck Stop Fund, but we're also going to other provinces. We're also involved in agriculture, where Belén has spoken about food inequality. So we need to ensure that we provide. We ensure that we provide. What's the word that I'm looking for? We need to ensure that we become meaningful to the community and also to the issues that the South Africa is facing in terms of food shortages. So we do invest we do have direct investment in agriculture and the retail and office space property. So the CRISA principles that are going to be considered by the TSRF, it includes all the principles of ESG integration, stewardship, capacity building and collaboration, transparency and governance. The next slide is just showing on, move this down here. It's just showing on, each and every principle that we look on, our emphasis on it, the implementation and the reporting, how we look at it from the fund. We are not saying that, we know it all, but this is how we know what we've been doing. And we believe that it is aligned to the CRISA principle, and there's also room for improvement as it evolves. In terms of ESG, we emphasize that integrating ESG factors to measure sustainability and ethical impact in the investment, in all the investment that we take, whether it's listed and unlisted. And we also believe that it helps to determine the investment future financial performance. How we do it for our listed mandate, the managers that we appoint to incorporate ESG consideration, and we include that into the mandates. And also we invest in the township economy, agricultural project, and the transfer fund. How we report it, we have realized that One of the challenges is the data that we get from different fund managers. So we have our sources, we have outsourced the ESG reporting to an external service provider to help the fund in terms of reporting. This helps in terms of identifying the data and ensuring that all the stocks are reported in a similar manner across different asset classes and also across different fund managers. It helps in ensuring that it highlights if a manager's ESG scoring deteriorates from one period to the next, we are able to see that, and it helps the fund to engage with the manager. There are different pillars that we look at. The environmental effect, the social effect, carbon exposure, reputational risk, and the governance. So we took that and it gives an overall ESG score. It also helps to review companies, to review the managers' risk management practices to see whether they engage in more risky practices. And we also believe that, ESG has an impact in the returns that the manager produces. And also the metrics also, it helps to exclude companies that you don't want to invest in via the investment mandates. So that's how we use the report. I need to move this. Yeah, I'm struggling to go to the next slide. I don't know what's happening here. Okay. The next principle is of stewardship. As the fund, we believe that we have the TSRF has incorporated accountable ownership responsibilities in its investment arrangement and activities. So we believe that as asset owners, we cannot delegate the fiduciary responsibilities, and we are accountable for effective stewardship. We need to ensure that there's responsible allocation of capital, management, and oversight. Especially on the unlisted investment where we have direct voting and we engage with the managers directly, we believe that we don't just put money and walk away, we engage with them. On the listed side, we have delegated the proxy voting to the appointment fund managers via the investment mandate agreements, because I believe that they do have the teams to engage with the companies that they invest in. They do have direct lines and they can engage with them on a regular basis than us from the fund. So we have delegated that. We do receive the proxy voting on the disclosure on an annual basis and the reasoning behind that. When we looked at the collaboration and capacity element of it, we believe that TSRF, we have always been committed to the ongoing transformation in the South African economy, and our commitment is intentional. So what we have done is that in terms of our policy, we're saying that we need to have more than 60% of our domestic asset to be managed by Black-owned and controlled managers. And currently, we have about close to 90% of our assets, domestic assets that are managed and controlled by Black-owned fund managers. And we also believe in the regular training of our trustees, because they are the decision makers. So what we do is that we do have internally sourced training. If there's changes in regulation, like now, we need to ensure that we implement CRISA 2, we review our IPS and ensure that the reporting that we're currently doing, it is aligning to that. Or how, as the fund, we can ensure that some of the elements, because we cannot align to all of them, but some of the elements that we're currently looking at is aligned to the CRISA 2 reporting. And it also helps us with the implementation to look at the way we've implemented it, is it aligned to CRISA 2? We also believe that we engage in collaboration, like with the IRFA, the Baseta conferences, and also because it helps us to look at how other pension funds are looking at this. Like now we have seen how the GPF is implementing CRISA 2. We can learn from it as a fund, and also collaborate with other funds. The next one is the governance. So the fund, as a fund, we conform to the governance principle, and we are committed to the highest levels of good governance and transparency. The fund, it has 4 subcommittees, and they are managing and monitoring the affairs of the fund, enforcing several governance principles, policies within the fund. Some of the policies, but they're not limited to this, is the declaration of business interest, the declaration of gifts, gratuities, and hospitality, confidentiality, and the authority limit to ensure that we align with Reg 28. And in terms of the reporting, we do have we show governance in our integrated annual reporting, and also at the quarterly Board of Trustees meeting, where we ensure that our investment are aligned to Reg 28. When it comes to transparency, because we also believe that our members' communication, transparency, we look at it from the communication with their members, and also with on the website, what other people can see what the TSRF is doing on our website. So we have integrated communication approach using a variety of platforms. We include print medias, mobile technologies, and web-based. So we do have the contact center. We do have our funds, our members' numbers, where they can be SMS or WhatsApp, and they can go into the website, and we produce newsletters. And on the website, they can also see the summary of benefits, and also their statements. We also do, in terms of reporting, we look at the member communication that we do, and the annual integrated reporting that we're looking at. Then going forward, we believe that reporting in ESG factors on all investment, because currently it's easier when we look at the listed side, but also the unlisted side, we encourage diversity between the employees, encourage that the project that we invest in, they do recognize the social impact in the communities that they invest in. And we do get data from our managers in terms of the number of employees, the gender, the age, to ensure that we were able to report across all of that. We also need to look at the overall ESG policy with measurable aspect of our key themes, to enforce full disclosure of the reporting on an annual basis. And we also need to measure the progress on the impact theme on an annual basis. We are currently reviewing the IPS for CRISA 2 principles and implementation thereof, and also the reporting of CRISA 2 in the integrated report. Lastly, we believe that CRISA 2, it provides a more mapped out focus area, so that asset owners, we as asset owners, we are able to measure ESG and socially responsible investing. And the TSRF, we believe that we align to CRISA 2 in terms of our principles, but we can do enhancement looking now at how we're going to implement it and the review of our APS. That's all from me. Thank you. I'll take questions if there's any.
Thank you, Grace. Are there any questions for Grace at the moment? Amanda, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add at this point.
Yeah, perhaps I can start with some of the questions we've received before, while we let people think of some questions for our guest speakers. So I wanted to ask perhaps Grace first. It's quite clear that you have a well-established process within the fund in terms of employing and the principles of CRISA 2, and you are quite successful to the point that you've also started reporting on your progress. But if we were to provide recommendations based on the experience that you've had on a fund where they are starting to embark on this journey of incorporating and considering CRISA, what are the key pointers that you would provide them with that they should be considering. And I would like this answer to have some practical tips for our audience today, especially because there are so many things that relate to sustainability that have already been put to funds in the last few months and years. Some of the guidance that is provided in Regulation 28 as well. People have been told about sustainable investments, how it relates to the PRI. What's the value proposition of adopting the CRISA 2 principles on top of everything else that they need to consider?
Thank you, Amanda. I believe that, from the fund's views, that we all believe in positive impact, and we all believe that as a fund, we want our members to retire in better communities. Even while they're still working, we need to ensure that they're taken care of. You need to be innovative as a fund. You need to be able to, we have been challenged with some of the investment that we have taken, but because we believe in positive impact, and we believe that, some of the challenges, South African challenges, need to be addressed through our investments. Yes, we do want positive returns, but we also have some social ills that we need to address. For us, it doesn't add value where we only chase returns, but our members retire in communities that are not developed, that there's no shopping complex. If you look at our portfolio, the shopping complex that we built in, it's township economy. We believe in township economy. There's a lot of risk involved there. But because of, as the board and as the fund officials, we all have the belief that what we're doing is in the best interest of our members. And we also need to ensure that as long as this is aligned to Reg 28, we will push ahead. You need to be innovative. The Trust of Fund is something that it was innovative. That's something that is unique to our fund and to our members, because we saw that it will benefit the members. So I would advise that, other funds, they would look at their members and to see what other investments that are not necessarily in there, because listed market is easy, you just invest in equity bonds and all of that, you chase return. But if you believe in meaningful impact investment, meaningful change that you want to implement within the economy, making a difference, then you need to be innovative. You need to invest in other asset classes or you need to be able to be brave enough to go to other investment that other people other funds might see it as being risky. However, what we also realize is that there are, it is not an easy journey, because what we do is that we don't allocate capital and move away. We monitor. You need to be involved. You need to understand what it is that you're buying. We need to monitor. We need to engage with the fund managers that we have invested in. We don't just allocate capital and move away. We are involved, we also, hence I said, we sit on the advisory committee. The investment that they make, we need to make sure that it's aligned to the fund's principles, and looking at also, implementing transformation within, say, the managers that we invest in. It was not an easy journey, but I mean, TSRF is one of the few funds that have meaningfully done that and successfully done that. To invest with majority Black-owned and managed asset managers in the country. So you need to, I would say that, as I said, sorry, you need to believe in it. You need to have buy-in, and you need to engage all stakeholders. You need, the trustees need to know how it moves into the betterment of the members, because trustees are also members of the fund, and fund official as well. Whatever we do, our fiduciary duty is also to ensure that whatever that we do, it's also for the betterment of our members.
And those are good points, and you have been absolutely successful in terms of incorporating ESG factors in your investments. And I know that in a number of conferences, the TSRF strategy around what it's doing for its members from a sustainability perspective is often quoted and cited as an example. But obviously there would be other complexities if a fund was not a sector fund. But before I ask you another question, Grace, I wanted to ask Belena a question that relates to the value proposition of CRISA. With GEPF having been, a co-creator or co-writer of CRISA to make it relevant in the sector. What is the value proposition? Because it's not mandatory, it's not a regulation per se. What would compel a fund to adopt the CRISA principles?
Thanks for that, and a great question. I think, the value add would be to assist the trustee or the fund to begin the journey of incorporating ESG. I think it certainly, kind of gets the mind thinking, gets the organization thinking of what are our strategic risks? What are the risks that will impact the sustainability of paying that pension promise for the future? Where are we at? In my mind, I do believe that it helps start that journey. And of course, I wouldn't say that, we've got it all right, and we certainly know what we're doing. I think, yes, a lot of us are ahead of that journey, but as we've seen, of course, over the last decade, things have changed. It was, as I mentioned earlier, it started off as just governance, and now, it's into ESG, and then it's sustainability, and then it's become SDGs, so the talk has really changed. But in principle, at the heart of it all, it's to help us begin that journey of where are we at? What is our value at risk? Is what we're currently doing sustainable? Are we able to pay that pension promise? And if not, how can we mitigate against these risks? So I think it's all about, risk mitigation. So if you're not doing any thinking about the future, then inherently it means that you will be unable to pay that pension promise. And then, of course, that would breach your fiduciary duties. I mean, we've seen, I think it was in Australia, I think it may have been 2 or 3 years ago, but, there was a pension fund member who was able to take the pension fund to court to say, you guys are not thinking about the sustainability of the fund, and therefore you are in breach of your fiduciary duty simply by not taking into account climate change risks. So I think the value add is that whilst the trustee may have not moved ahead with society's thinking, and I think CRISA may help in also just bridging that gap of where society is moving towards and how the fund is moving. So I think it's bridging that gap.
And you've had your hand up. Thank you very much, Belena. I think it's well put in terms of that value add and being responsible in our duties as trustees. And you've had your hand up. You want to ask your question?
What I like about these two speakers is that they represent two very different perspectives. One from a defined benefit fund like the GEPF, where it's we're hugely dependent on them to have the impact in terms of the South African economy and South African government. But they can afford to do that because they're backed by the government, and the government takes the risk. The thing that's really impressive about the transports fund, retirement fund, is, and they really are impressive, is they're a defined contribution fund like most of your members are. And so the members take the risk. And I go back to a comment you made, Amanda. Because they are sector specific, was this what allowed them to align, get an agreement among the members as to what their priorities were? Because you've seen the pushback that's coming in the US to a lot of these strategies, because members don't all agree whether climate change should be the top priority, or whether inequality, or whether or not, transportation, those things that they have along the highway where tractors could stop, and whether those were priorities. But a question that I wanted to ask both the GPF and the TRSF, yeah, TRSF, is you both talk about supporting Black managers, and that's a huge priority for South Africa. But the kind of reporting you're going to be requiring to fill all of these sort of CRISA requirements is hugely costly for these small managers, hugely costly. It's hugely costly for the big managers. So how do you ensure that you're kind of asking for the smaller managers, but then you're putting massive demands on them in terms of what they will need to report back to you on? And how do you make that balance? And how do you help them, given they probably got limited resources to do this? That's for both of you, whoever wants to answer that first.
I'll go first. We are still, we take cost consideration into, we take that, into the reporting that we require from fund managers. Currently, we have outsourced that to a service provider where they do have scale. So, and also because we're reviewing our IPS, we'll see that how would that have an impact at the, the requirement that would be needed from the fund managers. And yes, you are correct in saying that, they're smaller, most of our managers are smaller players, and it will have a huge cost impact. However, the reporting element will look at the ones that would make it easier for the managers to report on, and will also be engaging the service provider to ensure that, the cost, it's not a burden of the fund manager. It's all about being engaging and collaborative, to see how would this requirement have an impact at the fund manager level. As I said, it's an evolving practice. We are reviewing our IPS now to see how we can implement it. And it's something that we will, on an annual basis, continuously engage and to see which ones are key, for us as the fund, and to be able to report on. But we won't necessarily be reporting on, we'll look at all reporting elements of the CRISA 2, the ones that, we are currently doing and we can enhance on. That's our approach. We'll see how it goes as the requirements evolve, or as the fund evolve into reporting of CRISA 2. But we don't be separate report. We'll also see from the fund's point of view how we integrate it to either our integrated reporting, or if we want to do a stewardship reporting. It's something that we will see as a fund as we're reviewing our IPS.
So Grace, one more question that I just wanted to ask you specifically, because you said in your presentation that you let the asset managers do the proxy voting because you felt that they were in the best position to take decisions. But what do you then do as a fund when you've got asset managers that are on two sides of an argument, the way you've just had recently with the whole SASL vote? So one set of managers vote against the proposition, the others vote for it. How do you reconcile that if you've outsourced the proxy voting to the asset managers?
We look at how sorry, are you done? Yeah. Can I continue? Sorry, I thought, okay, thank you. We look at, because of the reporting, you'll also have the reasons, of why they voted for or against. And when we employ managers, we'll also look at their investment processes and the engagement with the fund managers. If they believe that, say the proxy voting, it was for certain elements, and they also believe in engagement. Because for an example, SASL, we cannot just say that we don't want a manager to hold a SASL stock. We believe in engaging, and also to see how we can assist how they can assist the companies to contribute better towards climate change. So if they do have a policy, some they'll say, they have a policy, they report on it in terms of the improvements and things like that. We look at the reasoning behind. We don't necessarily say, okay, you voted against, we don't agree with you. We look at, was there collaboration? Do we understand the reasoning? And we because we have delegated that to them. For us, it's more to understand and to be comfortable that, yes, we agree with you if you say yes, and we agree with you if you say no. We don't dictate to them.
Okay. Perhaps I can ask the question that was posed in the Q&A by Zibuze Gunene. And his question is, how effective will CRISA 2 be when South Africa is grey listed? Anyone can answer the question.
So I think it's sort of those systemic risks that Belay was talking about earlier on, and requires probably some political engagement, probably some element of retirement funds being able to influence government policy, but effectiveness of government operations and all the people related to the whole grey listing issues, I think maybe something we as citizens of a country need to take up and hold our government responsible. I don't know if we as individual funds or fund members can necessarily do anything to that. But I think, and I mean, Belena and Grace jump in here, but the CRISA principles and the principles around governance and all those things are probably principles that would assist the government to be able to achieve some the things needed to, I mean, obviously it's a very complex thing. I'm being very reductionist, and I know it's very, very complex, but, you know, like the broad principles are obviously the things that need to be taken into account.
I certainly,
I'm just jumping in there. Yeah.
I certainly do.
Sorry,
I certainly agree with you, Wayne. And I think, you know, around the principle of collaboration is probably an area that, you know, where CRISA does talk about. And also, I think as investors, as if we collaboratively engage and come together to say, you know, we these are the principles that we agree with or we sign up to. And, you know, that is how, you know, you see change over time. So things like stewardship codes are not, you know, a once-off thing that, you know, you sign up to and then you forget about. You have to live those values. And something with grey listing, I think it's obviously something that it's a systemic issue that has, you know, crept up over time. And that is why stewardship codes are so important, because it kind of assists in the prevention of, it's certainly not a cure, but I think it kind of does assist, you know, the trajectory of stewarding capital towards the right things. There was one other question of Anne about Black managers and reporting requirements. You know, I think certainly from the GPF's perspective, when we, for instance, start to, you know, take on, let's say, a private equity investment, you know, one of the questions that we do ask is, are you a PRI member? And of course, you know, we understand that, for instance, PRI, you're paying, you know, gazillions because it's in pounds. But, you know, if the asset manager were to answer no, we certainly would, you know, it doesn't mean that it's a write-off. You know, then the question that follows is, what, you know, good principles or governance aspects do you take on board? What are some of the things that as a fund you take to be serious? You know, is there alignment with the GPF's policies or, you know, investment thinking? And that is where we try and find that alignment. So, Anne, I hope that answers your question. Thanks.
And Belena, I mean, you spoke about stewardship and governance. You know, what's the main difference between the two concepts and principles? Because, you know, when you read the brochure, it refers to stewardship in the governance principle, and then it refers to diligent stewardship in the stewardship principle. So what is the, why was there need then for two different principles? Is it the same thing, split into two, or are these distinctly different?
So I would say they are different, but I certainly would say that they are the other side of the coin, right? So I don't think that you can look at one thing or one aspect and not consider the other. So for me, stewardship would be, how are you steering the ship, right? How is your capital moving into the financial system, and what impact does it have? So that is really how I personally look at it. And in terms of looking after, the monies on behalf of pensioners, beneficiaries, are we doing the right thing? And you may find that I keep saying doing the right thing, but it literally is. Are you turning a blind eye to aspects such as like child labor, for instance, or food insecurity? Do you believe that it's, as an organization, do you believe that it's something that is not relevant to you? If you feel that that is the case, then okay. But what other aspects do you think are relevant to you, as an organization? I think that governance is literally just the G in the biggest scheme of things. And certainly, I think as an ESG practitioner, you do see the overlaps. I don't think that you can do well in the governance aspect and not well in the environmental aspects, because there are overlaps to it.
And I think it's integrated thinking within the way you apply these principles, because they will have a systems impact. And I wanted to ask Grace a question that relates back to this sector discussion around how it was probably a little bit easier within your fund to have the conversation on sustainability and specific projects that you would invest in that had a direct impact for members. But what are the challenges? So it's good and well to present all the positive impact, progress and achievements. But what are the challenges and the hurdles that you had to overcome to get to where you are now? As guidance for other funds that are considering embarking on this journey as well, so that they don't have to, repeat the same mistakes that you encountered in the early years when you were investing in sustainable projects.
I think, the challenges is more of ensuring that there's alignment in the project that you invest in. For an example, with the truck stop fund, we're 50% owner, and we had to ensure that the Harry Smith one, that with the other investors, they are aligned. We need to make sure that it was important for our members. So we needed to make sure that other elements, such as ensuring that there's clinics around there, there's good hygiene, our members can shower. And so those are the things that we brought in. They were not there. It was just where the trucks should stop, but then we also ensure that, they need to relax even overnight while they are there. So, there are refreshment facilities, there's areas where they can go, have a good meal and watch soccer or, whatever, because they do have TV screens. So they get to move away from their trucks and go and sit somewhere where, it is good, for their well-being. And also if they need to visit the clinics, they can do that. And also, it's something that is unique to the truck stop fund. And the hurdle is to make sure that, you align and you also get buy-in, because you are also, let's say, as an example, you are investing within a community and there's also municipality involved. There are other other truck stop fund are trying to copycat what we are doing, but then they're not doing it the correct way. There's security issues. So we wanted to make sure that our truck stop fund, especially the Harry Smith one, because what we have experienced was that during the riots in Durban, most of the trucks, they went there to go park. I mean, it was fully packed because they knew that their trucks were secured, there won't be theft within that. And because when you enter, through the gates, there are cameras throughout, ensuring that whatever that you say it was stolen. So what they do, they view the cameras. So if a truck driver say, I've lost 1, 2, 3, 4, they will see when the truck entered, did it have all of that? So it's like a 24 view of that. So security, we knew that it was world-class security. We also need to ensure that, there's continuous, now load shedding is a problem. You need to make sure that there's continuous electricity there. So, there are solar panels, there are other measures that they put in place, that they engage with the municipality to ensure that, the grid times, if they say that electricity is going to go at this point, they do have backup. So there's always electricity going. So there are other challenges that we are, experiencing, but it's a matter of collaboration and engaging with other stakeholders, and also ensuring that making them aware that, it is a flagship truck stop, and we want to make sure that whether it's load shedding or not, we continue to be effective. We continue so because most of the trucks that they come from big truck stop, so from big truck funds. So they will ensure that they want to make sure that the security, that the drivers get enough rest, that they can relax, and then continue with their journey. So I think that the hardest is just making time, because it does get it is testing in terms of engagement. You need to make sure that you are all on the same understanding, you buy in, you've got the same vision, you want to provide the best truck stop fund, because what we also learned was that it was voted by truck stop members the best in South Africa, and that was quite key. The best truck stop fund. Yes, and also the other competitors that are mushrooming, we engage with the regulators. Now we want to ensure that the petroleum industry is well regulated, because we have learned that, there are other mushrooming truck stop where they mix other elements within the diesel, and the diesel prices are quite low compared to what we offer. So we need to ensure that, it is standardized. So it's a matter of, engaging with the regulators, ensuring that the regulation is in place. It's a continuous, collaboration, and that's the only thing that it's not easy, but if you believe it, and if you believe that, you can make a positive impact, and you can collaborate, you can convince, it is doable.
Yeah, and I hear from how the the truck stops are designed. It appears to be that it's definitely human-centered design. And that's what makes it effective and appealing and so successful. And from what you're saying, that, bringing in all the stakeholders, having the right conversations at the right levels, from the foundational aspects of intending to be in this space, will go a long way in creating a solid base for success. You wanted to ask a question, Wayne?
So it's more comment and then sort of a question, maybe just throw that out there. I think important thing is, you ask the question, how do you start? I think the first question you probably have to ask yourself is, what is the strategy of the fund, and what are you trying to achieve? And I mean, a lot of these discussions that come out of this is for me based around that question, that soul searching. And my experience that many boards of trustees don't invest the time to ask that question. There's a focus on the IPS, but the IPS in itself can give you the returns and all the things, but it's not giving you these other things that you need to consider. Possibly just an observation. I mean, I don't know, Grace, whether that's something you've experienced in your board, or Belena, when you engage with your trustees. Yeah.
Well, certainly from the GPF, the board does take that time to think about the strategy. I mean, it is reviewed annually, actually. There's a board strat session that they go away with Exco, and there is that discussion of where are we at, what are we trying to achieve, are we living the vision, the mission, are we achieving exactly what we had set out at? So yeah, we do take the time, and I think it's basically because we are the largest fund in South Africa. So we cannot afford to make mistakes. We cannot afford to not have that strategy aligned to the board, and of course Exco, and of course having that cascade down even into performance agreements. So it is something that we take quite seriously.
Just to add on to that, I think it is something that we also take quite seriously at the TSRF, the time to ensure that the board understands the investment that we go into, and some of the responsibilities are delegated to the investment committee. So when we do site visit, we actually put in time to go with our investment committee members to go and let them see the physical assets. It is a tangible thing that they can see. It is not like, when it's listed on the market, all they see are the returns, but then here they understand, they can see the progress from what it was the year before. They understand the returns that they get from that asset class. And also because of most of these are, unlisted, so they do have the J-cap effect, and they do understand why, it will take longer for them, to provide positive returns, not like when you invest in a stock where it just grows. And also when the stock market, doesn't perform very well, we find that, these asset classes are cushioning the performance of the fund. So it helps them to understand the overall impact that, different asset classes have in terms of diversification in the portfolio. So when they do make informed decisions. And investing in unlisted is not easy. We try to make time to make sure that our investment committee understand what we're trying to do, where it's aligned to the board vision overall, it's aligned to the fund vision, and we work with them through the journeys. Because we are all at the end of the day, accountable, and as the board, they're accountable for the performance of the fund. So we do take them through the site visits. Any changes that you want to implement, the engagement every quarter. If we have had certain engagement, we do report on that.
I agree completely, and I think that there is absolute value in diversifying, taking consideration of what strategies you want to employ, and make sure that they're embedded in your IPS. But we also need to guard against having too many strategies within an IPS, because the impact that you are speaking about then gets diluted, right? So a fund needs to be clear. I think, going to the point that you made, Wayne, it needs to be clear what it wants. So what's the soul of the fund, if I can put it in a philosophical perspective, and then make a determination as to, okay, this is the strategy we're going to employ, so that it becomes more effective. But I want to just go on a little bit of a tangent here. I got a message from one of our members who wanted to get more insight into what this principle on transparency is. We speak about transparency in so many areas of the investment spectrum. And in most instances, the conversations usually zone into transparency of fees. But what do we mean when we say transparency from a CRISA perspective? And how can our members take it back to their funds so that they can see that there's actually, comprehensive understanding and clarity and exposure and disclosure within the space, because it is quite complex, and some of the things that happen within sustainability strategies appear to be almost mystic in a sense, because They are long-term strategies that you cannot tangibly say the result is going to look like this. So what does this transparency really entail, and what does it cover?
I think from the GPF's perspective, it's about how are you taking into account ESG aspects? Why do you believe that these are the risks that we should be looking at? How are we voting? What are we voting on? Why did we vote against this, and why did we agree to vote in favor of that? What is our value at risk? You know, so it's about that whole investment value chain, and being transparent, you know, not hiding any material information from your trustees, so that they are able to make informed decisions on the fund. So I think, you know, it's so that there's no information asymmetry between members and, you know, the trustees, or, you know, the office of the trustees. So that for me is what is transparent. You know, that is what transparency is.
And what do you tell your members, Grace, what transparency is from a CRISA perspective, as you pushing CRISA and saying to them, this is a good code to adhere to?
Yeah, because of our trustees are also members of the fund, and they do take the report back to their respective unions. So what we do is that we ensure that, you know, there's timeous and accurate disclosure. As the fund official, you know, and also the investment committee, we want to always make sure that should there be any adverse events that are happening within one of the investment, we do report on it timeously and it's accurately. And if should there be a need for us to invite the fund manager to come, because we have done that previously, where, you know, we have shown the concept and we said, come and report back to our board. And, you know, all the members, they can ask questions and see whether they're comfortable with. And, you know, we do put them on the watch list to say, we want to see how things evolve. And we don't necessarily wait for the quarter to end. If, you know, the risk increases, then we will, you know, inform the investment committee, and it will eventually go to the board, and we'll ask for a quick meeting to say, this matter that has been on the watch list, we see that the risk is increasing. We do not have the appetite to continue, you know, taking that risk. How can we go about how can we go about, you know, ensuring that we don't delay, we act timeously. So it's a matter of, you know, disclosure and communicating effectively, so that, you know, the next quarter, then they don't come and ask what happened to 1, 2, 3, 4. Because how did we come up? How did we end up here?
Yes. So how do you manage controversies that are related to some of the investments? Because there is a plethora of stories around controversies, greenwashing. They even there's a big ESG, anti-ESG movement in the US, because they're saying that there is, you know, a lot of activities within the ESG space are a bit suspect. It's some of it is virtue signaling. So if there are any controversies that relate to investments that you have made, how do you respond to them? Do you leave them to your asset managers to respond, because obviously they would have made that investment, and it's obviously they would have made it based on their convictions and their house view. But if a member comes and says, but look at what's happening in this space, why should we continue being invested?
I'm happy to answer first. So from the GPF's perspective, you know, I think it's important to understand that when you are invested, you will, you know, some investments will do exceptionally well and some will not do well. That is just, you know, the fundamentals of investing. I think what the question comes in when it is quite a material, because you see, you've got the materiality issue. So you may be, you know, a 60%, for instance, shareholder in an entity. However, on your fund, it's not that material. So it's about that. There's that principle, and then number two, it would be, how material is this when you look at, the broader E, S, and G spectrum. So, that is some of the considerations that we would make. And then, of course, the third aspect would be being transparent, of course, with your member or your trustee. And number four would be engagements with that specific entity. Because often you may hear of a controversy, but of course, the media may have be reporting on one area of that controversy. And so it's very important as a long-term investor not to be swayed by every single thing that is out there, so it's about really applying your mind and having that frank and candid conversations with the investee to try and find out, what has happened and how can we actually try and salvage any value lost. So, at the heart of it all, it's about protecting your investment for the long term. Thanks.
Thank you, Belena, and thank you, Grace, and thank you, Amanda, for all these questions. I mean, in a way, being involved in funds myself, all seems and feels a little overwhelming. Seems like a lot, and maybe I want to sort of say for people, and maybe my question is, if you haven't been on this journey, or you've partially been on this journey, what would be the first steps? I mean, I think both of you, from the complexity of your answers and your presentations, obviously very embedded in the practices of your funds. But if I'm starting, like I said, from scratch, or I've done some of it and I'm thinking about moving forward, maybe a 2 or 3 pointer to sort of encourage the behavior. I think we all know why it's a good thing to do, but where do I start and not feel overwhelmed? I think that's the the one thing. Sometimes inertia is better than that sense of it's just too much, we're too small, or it's I think you so maybe Belena or Grace, I don't know. Grace, maybe you start and then we move over to Belena. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think it is important to be intentional, and for the advice that I would give is that if it is in your IPS, if it's part of what you believe in, it's part of the philosophy, the principles, and the objectives of the fund, then it needs to be in the IPS, but we also need to be intentional about it, because it is not an easy road to take. You will get pushback, and it takes time. I think one thing, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. When you invest in certain asset classes, when you have views that, we want to increase allocation towards transform managers, it will take time. It is not something that happens overnight. You will get pushbacks, and, but you have to be intentional about it. You have to have it in your policy, and you have to align it, to the objective, the principles, and what the funds wants to achieve. Thank you.
I would certainly say start small and be practical about it. You obviously can't build, Rome was not built in a single day. You can't eat an entire elephant in one day as well. So start small. Start understanding, why do you actually exist as an organization? What is important to you as the organization? What do you guys believe in? And how do you match that to how you steward capital? And I think from there, you start to understand what are some of the risks and how can we start, mitigating against these risks, whilst understanding, the broader context in which you operate in. Thanks.
Thank you. Amanda, any last thoughts from your side?
No, for me, I'm a believer in in the ESG space and sustainability. So this has been absolutely worthwhile in terms of insights around the value proposition, the successes, and how to manage risks and challenges that one will encounter when one is, trying to be part of this ecosystem. And I think the value for our members is that it's important to start, and just getting some learnings from those funds that have succeeded, and from what Grace said earlier on about collaboration and advocacy in engagement with regards to certain regulation that impacts some of the sustainable strategies. I do believe that leaning on other funds where they have had success and helping them to go on this journey as well will be most useful. So I don't think in this space it's a competitive space. Trying to make our country better for ourselves is we should all be collaborating, and there'll be many opportunities for that to happen. So yeah, I think with that, thank you very much for your presentations and for your insights and your expertise and sharing your time with us.
Thank you, Amanda. And Grace and Belina, any last words? And then and thank you to everyone who made the time to listen to this and think about how they can apply some of this in their practices. Belina, over to you. Let's start with you. Yes.
I just wanted to say, thank you and good luck, and start small, and as you start to run that race, you will realize how far you will come. Thanks.
I'd also like to say, thank you, and also, just to add on to what Belina, I do agree that you need to start small, because we didn't realize how far we've came up until a couple of years later. Then you realize that actually we have ticked some of the boxes here, and it's something that we continuously trying to improve on. We haven't perfected it yet, but even the as we were saying, with all this other investment that we go into, there are some challenges, and you learn from that and you perfect the model and you apply it, you grow it, so that when you increase that investment, then that you learn from the learnings that you have. It takes time, but you have to start. You have to start. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. Maybe Amanda, closing words, and then we'll wish everyone a good afternoon. Thank you. Over to you, Amanda.
Okay, thank you everyone for gracing us with your presence. Thanks to our speakers for that very informative sessions and their presentations. And I think the conversation has been robust on both sides of the debate around the importance and the value of ESG. The greatness about having a CRISA code is to enable some kind of structure for this sustainability and ESG journey. So I would encourage attendees and members to go and read up on what they can do, what CRISA 2 is about, and there are some frequently asked questions on their website as well, that which are questions you might also have, and and those are answered quite comprehensively as well on the site. So I encourage greater engagement on ESG, and I hope CRISA will be a success. It is relevant for in the South African context. So if you were to compare it with other codes that have a more Eurocentric perspective, it is important to look at what CRISA is saying about the positive impact that we can have in our in our domestic markets. So thanks everyone for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. And also, please be mindful of our IRFA conference, which will be held in September on the 18th and 19th of September. And we hope you're going to join us at the conference as well. So thank you everyone for your attendance.